It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So
This isn't Self-Esteem Weekly. This is a reality check.
Craig, shut up.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Gina Abudi is here with her new book about implementing positive organizational change. Welcome to the podcast. Hope you had a very happy Thanksgiving. And the holiday season is upon us. And as I do every holiday season, my calendar of zoo animals from around the country is available. Head over to realitycheckpodcast.com/calendar, and you can get to see more information on how to order one. If you'd like bulk orders with a custom logo on the cover, you can contact me at craig@speakercraigprice.com, and we can make that happen for you. It's very easy to do, and do it sooner rather than later, because the holidays will be here and gone before you know it, and by the time you order them, if you order too late, it'll be the new year. But I guess with the calendar, it's always good until at least April. So just go to realitycheckpodcast.com/calendar and order yours today. Every penny goes to redapes.org. We've had Richard Zimmerman on the show before to talk about that. You can learn about that by going to realitycheckpodcast.com and put in Richard Zimmerman in the search bar. Today's podcast is our good friend Gina Abudi of Abudi Consulting. She's got a new book called Implementing Positive Organizational Change, a Strategic Project Management Approach. And, we all go through changes. I'm still recovering from the move to California. Nothing seems to act the same. The microphones are acting different. They sound different. The internet connection doesn't seem to be the same. Things you think you should just plug in and work like it did before, but you unplug it, right? It should just plug it in and do what it does. But it doesn't work that way sometimes. And sometimes people think that that's how it works at the office. You plug in one directive or goal for another, and everyone collecting a paycheck should just do it. And business as usual. But change can be disruptive. It can scare some folks. It's just being different can be annoying. Even if that different is better. And even if that different is provably better. So let's make organizational change easier in something I'm not as familiar with. Make it a positive change with Gina Abudi. When we talk about change, you're talking about finding ways to make change positive. But as I read like LinkedIn or business articles, it seems like change is a lot of positive right now, because the big buzzword is disruption and disrupting things and making changes. Are you seeing that most people still are approaching change in a negative way?
Yes, I am actually. And it's a negative way because we forget. If we're the ones who are driving change, one of the things that we forget is that people adapt to change and accept change in different ways. And we have to remember that just because something might seem a no-brainer or easy to us, there are other people who have a lot of other stuff going on, and we have to engage them in that change. We have to make them feel excited about the change. We have to let them see the change, not from the perspective of why it's good for the organization, although certainly that matters, but also why does it matter and why is it good for the individual in the organization.
And for those who have a keen listening ear, you're listening to Gina Abudi, who's been on the podcast, I think twice now. So this is your third time.
Yes, it is.
Back from more punishment. And she's got a great new book called Implementing Positive Organizational Change, a Strategic Project Management Approach. And so you're talking about engaging people almost individually, which if you have a large corporation can seem like a daunting task, but how can you actually connect with folks and show them why change matters?
One of the things that I like to do, and you're right, it does seem that you have a large change initiative in a global organization, but it is very doable. And one of the things you have to remember first is long before you start the change initiative, engage the people in conversations around change. And that's going to be done through a variety of ways. I like to do some face-to-face meetings, but I'm sensitive to the fact that we can't always get everybody face-to-face, so we're going to do some virtual sessions. For one organization I was working in, I was there pretty much 24 hours a day, a couple of days, making sure that every shift had me face to face to talk about change with them. So I engage people in a variety of ways. And then one of the things that I'll use, especially in global organization, is I'm not the only one talking about change. I want people who are non-managers but influential in the organization to also talk about the change and engage people in change.
So it's really not about making sure every single person embraces change in their way, but it's about connecting with certain key, I guess, milestone folks or anchor points and getting them to buy in?
Yes, we could use that. What I use is what I call a stakeholder support committee. And that is a group of individuals from throughout the organization, usually in non-management roles, representing every business unit, who are excited about the change at all levels of the organization and at all tenures, who help to talk about change. One thing we have to remember is even if we do everything well and try to engage people in change very early on, not everybody is going to accept and adapt to the change. I would love to see it happen, but 100% doesn't happen, not even in small organizations. But the more we talk about it, the more we engage people, the more they see something positive happening, the more likely they're going to come along and adapt to change. And the more people who are talking about change and how change is working for them, or how maybe they weren't so keen on the change initially, but hey, now they're pretty excited about it because they learned something, that helps more and more people get engaged. We want to keep having those conversations early on and throughout the change project.
Well, I certainly understand the need to have people who are excited about the change. Isn't there a spot for people who are not excited about it? Because if you just have people excited about it in your little committee here, and now I sound like my mom, your little committee, which I certainly apologize for.
That's quite all right.
How's your little sketch thing going? You mean my leadership talks that I give to IBM? Yeah, those things. No, isn't there a concern that you're basically preaching to a choir, and the people that you really need to get to, the people who are going to be more against the change, that you need to convince or slowly evolve into people who are pro-change, won't they be lost in the shuffle?
Well, yes, they can be. However, I do engage what I call the resistors to change, and I work with them. So when I'm leading a change team, I want some resistors on it. And I actually like resistance. I'm concerned if I don't see anybody visibly resisting a change. And the reason why is because I know someone in that group is not happy with what's going on. And when you have resistors to change, it really helps you better define the change initiative. Because people don't, all right, there are always a handful of people who just resist to resist. But the majority of people are resisting for a very good reason. And I want to understand about that resistance because that helps me shape a much better change initiative that's going to work for more people. So when I'm doing pilot testing of a change initiative, let's say a new technology being used, I will put resistors on that pilot test team. Let them poke all the holes in it they want. It's going to help us shape a better change. And for some stakeholder support committees, I have put on people who resist. I hesitate to tell clients sometimes that they should do that all the time because you have to really manage people, especially on something like a stakeholder support committee, if they're not happy about change, because the last thing I want them to do is talk about the negative. But I myself, I always engage resistance and change. And I'll say to them things like, I hear you, you're upset about the change. Help me understand what we could be doing differently. Help me understand what are we missing. So what that does is that drives a conversation with them and it gets them involved.
I call that the ugly baby syndrome, where everybody thinks that their plan, their new project, is just like their baby. They've been working on it real hard, and they fall in love with that baby, which as a parent of a human being you should do. But everybody says that their baby is beautiful and talented, and we know as non-parents of that child, some babies are ugly. And it's not that the parent needs to say that their kid is ugly, but in a business, you need to be able to point out the flaws and the problems in a project. And
Yes.
you need to have a couple of those resistors who will say, excuse me, that baby needs to put a cover on its face. There's a problem with this baby, because in business, ignoring problems can cause more problems. And
Yes, correct.
so is there a way that you incorporate that feedback? Because sometimes negative folks, and this is where I'm coming from, have expressed their opinion. It's a valid opinion. They express it the wrong way, were shot down hard, and so now they won't even speak up. How do we get those people, those resistors that are going to resist passively, to open up and talk to us more?
Yep. So one of the ways I find to do that is, and this is why I like to use a variety of ways to talk about change in an organization. Just using one way, just sending an email, just having an all-staff meeting is never sufficient. So by using a variety of ways, I start to find those people who, they may not necessarily be resistors, they just may be quiet, they just may be afraid to speak up. So by offering a variety of ways to engage people, small groups, one-on-one, focus groups, just hanging out in a cafeteria in an organization, to talk to people, or getting in early and hanging out at the coffee machine, enables me to sort of begin to pinpoint the people who tend to be a little bit quieter and reach out to them. One other thing that I do is I'm a big proponent of doing surveys, and I always prefer when I do a survey to gather some ideas about a change initiative coming up. I prefer that everyone puts their name to it, but I always leave the option to not include your name. Even though it might be harder for me to figure out who those people are if they put something on a survey like, this is not going to work and this is why, it still enables me to address their concerns. And even if I can't address it directly with, say, you, if you're the one, by addressing it all, I'm still reaching you.
Yeah,
and you might have a conversation with me. And even if you don't, I'm still helping you manage through that change.
And I'll be honest with you, it most likely will be me. I resist change. I change a lot, but I also, when it comes to certain things, I'm very stubborn. So it probably would be me. Now, the book says it's a strategic project management approach. Now, we both have worked with PMI, the Project Management Institute. You've been I think you're a past president, correct?
Correct.
So you get all the say, but none of the responsibility, right? That's the best spot.
Yes.
You get to advise. You get to say, "Hey, I'd like you guys to do that. Maybe think about this," and then you have no responsibility because you've already did all the hard work. So
it works out perfectly.
It's great. It's the great spot. But for those listeners who are unfamiliar with project management, what would you consider the project management approach, and how does that differ than just a regular business approach?
So the project management approach really just puts sort of a process and a structure behind it. Part of it is because I want people to see the link that every project that you undertake in an organization, even the smallest project, is a change for somebody somewhere in the organization. So if we look at things from that perspective, right, then we tend to be more focused on the people, which is I want people to be focused on. I want them to be focused on the people and how change impacts them. And by taking a project management approach, all we're doing is putting a framework around how we think about, launch, implement, roll out, and evaluate change within the organization.
It's a repeatable process that you can use later on for a different change, but at least you'll have some structure involved.
Correct.
Yeah, I just, because like I said, I know I have a lot of folks who listen but aren't project managers and may not even be business owners, but they're interested in maybe having a business perspective. And project management is truly what I would call for business nerds. It's for it's like statistical people. It's like analysis. They really like structure and they like plans and they like rules. And I know a lot of people see entrepreneurs as these gunslingers who come in and have these great ideas and just kind of make money, and it doesn't work that way all the time.
That's correct. Yeah, and the book was written from the perspective of, even though it's a strategic change management approach component, it's written from the perspective of people who have to drive or lead change even if they're just leading a small component of a larger change initiative to help them understand, how do we engage people? How do we get the organization ready? How do we get the employees ready?
Well, this is going to be a two-part question because, and I'll do the first part now, is that you have global companies that have projects all across the world. My wife used to do oil and gas, so she had to do with Saudi Arabia, she had to do with China, she had all these little different spots. How do you approach change from a cultural perspective where what every American would think, oh, this is exactly how you would do it, it may not work for someone in India or someone who is in China or in Saudi Arabia?
Yes. And I manage and lead a lot of global change initiatives. So the way we look at it is, I look at it from the perspective of understanding the perceptions of change within that culture. And I work a lot. One of the things that I like to do is understand the culture I'm walking into from a high level. And there's a lot of information out on the internet. There are books you can get about how different cultures look at leadership, how they look at the ability to communicate and speak their mind, how they collaborate, how they make decisions. And one of the things I say to people is, bear in mind that just because that might generally describe a culture, the focus is on generally. We're all unique, right? And we're all impacted by a lot. So I look at the perception of that culture as it relates to change. If I'm working in a culture where, for example, people don't tend to speak up, whatever they're told to do by the leaders is what they do, and they don't expect to have or want to have input, right? I want to go in and spend more time getting their input, developing a relationship with them, making sure that they give input. Otherwise, if I frame an initiative for a global organization only based upon a particular culture that says, hey, yeah, we have leaders in the organization, but my 2 cents is valuable and I'm going to give it, the change does not meet the needs of the broadest group of people. So I may then spend a lot more time personally engaging those people who tend to be quieter to make sure I get input from them to help them understand why their input is valuable.
Do you seek out ambassadors or liaisons in the actual companies versus just all the research you do? Because sometimes research is great. It's book smart versus street smart. You may have all the information, but that may not work for that particular, let's say, county. Like if you did a research on the United States, there's so many different cultures in just the United States.
Correct.
And a lot of people think, oh, it's India, so it must be just this culture, and there's different parts of India. Is that something that is part of your stakeholder support committee, maybe? A cultural liaison of some sort?
Yes, exactly, very much. So a stakeholder support committee will have, for a global change initiative, will have people from across the globe representing all cultures who are involved in the organization, involved in change. That includes, by the way, when I work with organizations that may have, and I'll think of one example, for a global pharma company, we had 5 people based on in a remote location in China, and 3 of the 5 people in that location actually served on a stakeholder support committee. They helped with other areas of China too, but we got that remote location engaged. So yes, so stakeholder support committees, I never try to put sort of a number to how many should be on it. The most I've had on a committee was, I want to say 75 or 80 for a large global initiative who they're helping to spread the word. And they don't just help spread the word, but they bring back, to kind of add to what you were saying, they bring back intelligence to me. So somebody's more likely to speak to somebody who they work with, they know, they trust, than they may be to speak to me because they don't know me well enough yet, or to speak to a leader in the organization, right? They trust people who are their peers. So I'm going to find out from them what's working, what's not, and be able to make adjustments to make sure the change project is more successful than if I didn't rely on the intelligence that stakeholder support committee can bring to me.
Well, then the second part of my question would be, as we're talking culturally, it also goes into generational. We've got
Yes.
America, so if we're just staying in America, but a 30-year-old thinks differently than a 45-year-old thinks differently than a 60-year-old. I've had people in discussions we worked together at a couple PMI professional development days, and I've had project managers with 25, 30 years of experience tell me they won't listen to anybody under 30 years old, which is crazy to me. But how do you get past that and get a generational view when even some of the people in charge aren't really predisposed to even listen to the feedback of younger generations?
To be honest with you, if I think of sort of, I'm going to talk about the three main generations that we see: the baby boomers, Generation X, and Generation Y, right, or millennials.
Yep.
When I look at that group, they actually all accept and adapt to change. The younger the person in the workplace, the more highly or more rapidly they adapt to change. And they value that change. I think what we sometimes forget is that each of those generations actually expects and wants two things to accept change. They want strong leadership driving the change, and they want effective and sufficient communications around change, and they want to be involved in the change. So from a generational perspective, I prefer to bring the generations together, because I think they can learn from each other. But if I'm getting a lot of resistance to change, I will separate the generations initially and engage them a little bit more in change in ways that I think might work for them as a generational group. But then I want to mix them up a little bit. On a stakeholder support committee, I have when I talk about diversity on that committee, that diversity includes generations in the workplace.
So in all your experience, because we're getting ready to wrap this up, and I really appreciate your time, but of all the experience you've had, what has been the most difficult change that you actually got implemented? And you don't have to use actual corporate names if it was obviously proprietary information, but what have you seen that was the most difficult that actually turned out to actually change?
I would say the most difficult was for a medical institution, and what was difficult was senior leadership in a number of key business units that needed to come along with change were resisting change themselves. So why publicly around some of the executives, the C-level, like the CEO, they were talking about how great the change was, privately with their staff, they were moving against the change. It took me a little bit of time to realize it, and once I did, then I worked to engage that leadership group specifically in change and the benefit to them and the staff in the change. And I got them on board because I needed them at that point to get their staff on board. So one of the things I like to do is we assume sometimes that if senior leadership launches a change, they all support the change. And that is absolutely not true. You've got to have senior leadership on board because I need them to sponsor and support the change too.
Well, once again, the book is Implementing Positive Organizational Change, a Strategic Project Management Approach. Gina, where can people get the book and where can they find out more about you? Because you are a font of information, especially on project management, and any good business could use you.
Thank you. So you can find out more about me on my website, abudiconsulting.com, ABUDI consulting.com. As for the book, you can get it from, you can actually buy it off Amazon, or you can get it from J. Ross's website. J. Ross Publishing is who published it. Through J. Ross's website, you have access to download web added value downloads, which includes a number of assessment tools, checklists, surveys, and templates that readers could use to frame their own change initiative.
And some change that you've gone under, you have started to accept more speaking gigs. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So where can people bring you in? What kind of talks are you doing specifically, and what kind of audience are you really looking for?
I speak quite a bit with management audiences and leaders, and I speak most frequently on the topics of leadership, change management, and strategic project management.
Well, we've worked together in Madison and a couple other places. I know you're a great person to be around. You're a great speaker. Good luck on the speaking as well as the consulting.
Thank you.
That's the show. Thanks again to Gina for helping out. Don't forget, calendars are on sale at the site, realitycheckpodcast.com/calendar. You can follow the show on Twitter at realitycheckpod, like the Facebook page, and send any comments, questions, or guest suggestions to Craig at speakercraigprice.com. See you next week.